The rain fell like a song of mourning, endless and cold, whispering against the rooftops of a forgotten kingdom. High Vale, once a jewel of banners and bells, now slept beneath storm clouds, heavy with grief. Along the cobblestone paths that twisted between shuttered houses, a single forge still burned. Inside, where iron met fire, stood Kael, young, broad-shouldered, and silent as stone. Each strike of his hammer was steady and patient. Sparks burst like tiny suns around him, vanishing into the dark. He worked not for glory, but survival, shaping horseshoes, plowshares, the occasional sword for soldiers he would never meet. He had no family but the forge's master, old Brenner, whose eyes held both wisdom and sorrow. "You've got the hands of a craftsman," Brenner would say, "but the eyes of someone waiting for a storm." Kael never answered. He didn't know what he was waiting for, only that sometimes in the stillness before dawn he heard whispers in the rain, voices calling his name from far beyond the valley, soft as wind through old stone. On the third night of unbroken rain, the storm brought something other than water. A rider arrived, mud-caked, breathless, bearing the seal of the crown guard. His armor was cracked, his eyes hollow. He handed Brenner a parchment sealed with crimson wax. "All able-bodied men," the decree read, "are to report to Castle Valen. By command of the king." "War approaches," Brenner cursed under his breath. "War again. The north bleeds dry and the crown asks for more hands to bury the dead." Then, turning to Kael, his voice softened. "You're not going. You've got no debt to this kingdom." But Kael's gaze lingered on the parchment. A word pulsed through his mind. War. It stirred something deep, something that had slept too long. That night, when the forge was dark and the village silent, Kael dreamt of fire. He saw a battlefield drowned in shadow, a sword burning like a fallen star, and a voice echoing through the void. "The heir of the lost flame awakens." He woke drenched in sweat. And far off, in the woods beyond Elden Reach, a light flickered, as if faint, rhythmic, as if calling. By dawn, he was already walking toward it. The forest was older than memory. Trees rose like pillars in a cathedral of green shadow, their roots coiled deep into the bones of the world. The mist hung low, soft as breath. Kael moved slowly, each step pressing into silence. Then, in a clearing veiled with moss, he saw it. A sword. It lay half buried in the earth, its blade black as glass, etched with veins of silver that pulsed faintly with light. The air around it shimmered, thick with the hum of something ancient. Kael knelt, brushing away the soil. The instant his fingers touched the hilt, warmth surged up his arm. Not pain, but recognition. A voice thundered inside his skull, deep and vast as the sea. "The flame remembers." Light exploded through the clearing. Kael gasped, falling back as visions tore through his mind. A crown of fire, a dragon's roar that split mountains, a figure standing against a storm of shadows. Then, silence. The sword lay still beside him, its glow fading like a heartbeat. When Kael returned to the village, Brenner's face turned to ash. "By the gods," he whispered, "that's Emberfang, the blade of King Aldrich. It was lost when Valen fell a century ago." Before Kael could speak, a horn sounded beyond the ridge, long, low, and cold. Riders appeared on the road, cloaked in black. Their armor was etched with a serpent swallowing a crown. "Wraithbound," Brenner said, voice trembling, "dark servants of the Shadow Court." They dismounted without a word. One stepped forward, his face hidden beneath an iron mask. "We seek the sword of Aldrich," he said. "Surrender it, and we may let this place live." Brenner drew himself tall. No such blade here." The masked man tilted his head, and the forge's fire roared to life, burning white. Brenner shoved Kael. "Run." Kael froze as the shadows thickened. Brenner swung a hammer. The wraithbound raised a hand. Smoke spilled from his palm, wrapping the old man's chest. A whisper, and Brenner crumpled. Kael screamed, and the sword answered. Flame burst from the steel, white hot and alive. He swung blindly, and the air itself split open. The blast hurled the attackers backward, armor hissing like metal plunged into oil. The lead wraithbound staggered, his voice breaking through the heat. The flame still answers, the bloodline endures. Kael didn't understand. He only ran. Through rain and smoke, through forest and ruin, until his lungs burned and his hands bled. The sword's light dimmed, whispering faintly as if alive. Run. Live. When dawn came, Kael collapsed beneath a fallen oak, the blade across his knees. He stared into its dull reflection and whispered, "Why me?" No answer came, only the steady rhythm of his heart, a heartbeat that no longer felt like his own. Days turned to weeks. Kael crossed rivers and ruins, following rumors of the war. The northern lands had already fallen to the shadow. Villages turned to ash. Their people vanished or twisted into things that moved without souls. Yet everywhere he went, whispers followed him, of a young man bearing a sword that glowed like dawn, a blacksmith's apprentice who fought the dark and lived. By the time he reached Castle High Vale, his name had become a story. The king, old and waning, received him in a hall thick with incense and fear. "You carry the blade of Aldrich," the monarch rasped, "the last gift of the gods. Tell me, boy, do you know what fire you hold?" Kael knelt. "Only that it chose me." The king smiled faintly, sadness in the curl of his lips. "Then the choice is mutual." The shadow rises again. Our ancestors bound it once with the blood of the forest's guardian, a woman called Lyra. But her line was thought lost. Kael frowned. "Lyra?" The king nodded. "The same spirit that blessed Aldrich's sword. And if you bear her flame, then her promise lives through you." That night Kael stood upon the castle's battlements, the storm pressing close. He looked to the forest below, dark, endless, waiting. He could almost hear it breathing. He whispered to the wind, "What do you want from me?" And the wind answered soft as a sigh, "To remember." The next morning Kael rode south with a company of knights. Their destination, the Vale of Morn, the wound where the shadow had first awakened. The road was lined with ruin. Trees turned to ash, rivers to tar. The knights fell one by one to the darkness that crept like fog. By the time Kael reached the vale, he was alone. Mist covered the land, thick as grief. In its center stood a figure cloaked in black, tall and silent. "I have waited long," it said, its voice rippling through the fog. "The last heir of the forest's mercy." Kael drew the ember fang. "If you know mercy, then you know what I must do." The figure laughed, a sound like cracking bone. "You think yourself chosen? You are nothing but a spark of a dying world." Darkness surged forward, a torrent of smoke and shadow. Kael raised the sword, and green fire erupted along the blade. The clash was like thunder tearing the sky apart. Each strike carved light into night. The ground trembled beneath their war. Man and memory, hope and hatred. But the shadow was endless. Its laughter filled the valley. You cannot kill what was born from sorrow. Kael fell to his knees, the fire flickering. Pain tore through his chest. The darkness coiled around him, whispering, "Surrender." Then he heard her. Lyra's voice, clear as dawn. "Mercy can heal what anger has torn." Kael's tears mingled with the rain. Then mercy it shall be. He drove the sword into the ground and opened his arms. If you are sorrow, then I will share your pain. The fire spread, not in rage, but in warmth, the light of forgiveness. The valley glowed with 1,000 green embers, and the shadow screamed as it broke apart, each fragment turning to light before sinking into the soil. The forest breathed again. When silence fell, Kael stood alone. The sword's flame dimmed, its power spent. In the soft haze, a woman appeared, her hair like mist, her eyes calm as rain. Lyra. You listened, she said, her voice a whisper through the leaves, and the forest remembers. Kael bowed. Was it enough? She smiled. For now. The world will need its guardians again, but tonight it breathes. She touched his cheek, and her light faded into the dawn. Kael sheathed the sword. Around him grass grew where the darkness had fallen. Flowers broke through ash, birds began to sing, and far away, beyond the horizon, the sun rose over High Vale. He walked toward it, no longer a blacksmith, no longer a boy, but a guardian reborn through mercy, not might. And as he stepped into the light, the wind carried his name across the trees, through valleys and rivers, to every corner of a healing world. Kael. The forest whispered it back, endless and alive. Mercy endures. The flame lives.